in general, big data is all about generating signals from noise, right? And as video is moved onto the web, at a great pace, there's a ton of new data to understand about the users and about the content. And that's really sort of the sweet spot for online is knowledge of content and knowledge of user, right? And when you can intersect those two, all sorts of great things happen. The challenge with video is it's a binary file format, and the web has really evolved with a whole set of text technologies, right? Search is driven by text and URLs and those kinds of things. Yet video doesn't present itself that way to the web, and therefore presents some challenges in really getting at some of the opportunities that have already been established in text and display.
Well, I mean, first party and then third party data is challenging enough. And then when you add on top of that metadata, it kind of sounds like the recipe may be overkill. I mean, how do you start to deconstruct that and make it approachable for publishers and marketers? Right,
so in the case of Ramp, we've built a product called Media Cloud, and what we're able to do is ingest videos at great scale, and they come into our cloud-based system that basically enhances the value of those videos by using speech recognition to generate time-coded transcripts, time-coded tags, scene identification, thumbnailing, all those kinds of things. And those become raw material to helping make that video more valuable in the ecosystems of the web.
Can you talk a little bit about specifically, monetization, right? Because obviously that's paramount for any online video publisher. What are you seeing in regards to performance, ROI on advertising around or in video when we're leveraging contextual or metadata within video?
Yeah, I mean, I think the beauty is once you've created this wrapper of metadata around a particular video asset, it can be repurposed over and over again for different use cases, right? So in the case of discovery, right, you would use the metadata to make that particular asset part of the search economy, right? So make it discoverable by Google, Facebook, all those kinds of places. In the case of engagement, having that metadata allows things like search within the video, scene-based navigation, and you're driving more engagement with the user and thus creating ultimately more inventory because you're extending the sort of length of stay with that particular asset or collection of assets. And then finally with advertising, you're doing the same thing, but you're perhaps recasting that metadata in a way that makes it valuable to ad targeting, right? So you could take a basket of concepts that are presented in the video and distill those down to an ad category, because typically advertising is sold, not at the keyword level unless you're talking about search, but at the category level. So making it relevant to ad serving technologies and ad data technologies is the bridge that sort of completes the cycle.
Where does metadata fit into the big data ecosystem as it relates to first and third party data and tying it all together?
Yeah, I think there's an emerging opportunity. I think we're sort of exiting the first phase of online video where it was really about the bits and bytes, right? How do I get this video to stream from A to B? How do I make the player work? CDNs, caching, all the kind of techno stuff that wasn't there and is now there. So now we're looking at, I think, as an industry, and I think from the publisher perspective, how to generate revenue, how to make it valuable. And so the emerging opportunity here is sort of the data mart about all that video content to go along with the data marts about the audience, right, which have become pretty robust and advanced at this point. But the knowledge of the content is sort of a black hole still, and we've had increasing conversations with the ad networks and publishers who say, look, if I knew more about the piece of content this ad was going to run in front of, I could do a better job of targeting the ad to it. And at the end of the day, behavioral targeting is really about a sum total of the context that person's consumed over a period of time, right? So it's sort of a garbage in, garbage out. In this case, high quality data in and better advertising out.
But I mean, there's sort of an incongruency, right? That's one of the challenges. That video with Sight, Sound, and Motion is about storytelling, right? And if you think about those that are really executing against that of creating pure, online video that is great storytelling, where are they in the cycle of embracing data? I mean, I think NBC is sort of a leader in this space. I think the large media outlets are, but those guys that are pure online plays, where are they in regards to embracing data?
Yeah, it's early. I mean, I think that one of the other real unique aspects of video is it has a timeline, right? And a web page, an article, a blog doesn't have a timeline. It's a static piece of content. And along that timeline, there's tons of data that gets produced and thrown out, into the different systems that can be leveraged to take advantage of better advertising technologies. But I think it's early in terms of how that's being taken advantage of today. I think that's sort of an emerging opportunity as certainly as the amount of inventory grows, the amount of demand for that inventory grows, and then the demand for the sophistication of that inventory, the characterization of that inventory grows. Very much the way display and search advertising grew over the last decade.
If we take a publisher lens to kind of the power of ramp, it's a bit of turning the tables, right? Because advertisers and marketers got savvy first about using data to eliminate waste and drive ROI. Yeah. And so now we're seeing the emergence of the supply-side platforms, the supply-side ecosystem maturing because publishers have to retort, right? So what does that toolkit look like, right? Yep. Of an online video publisher? I mean, you have your first-party data, ideally, right? You obviously need a DMP to bring it together. So now we've got metadata. What else do you need to really activate the value of all that data to drive your average inventory up?
Yeah, and I think a little context helps here. I think the publishers feel a little burned by the first wave of the web where what made Google's advertising network so powerful is Google knew more about the publisher's content than the publishers did, right? By way of being able to calculate all of these links and creating sort of this ability to weight the value of a piece of content and keeping that for themselves, they built an extremely powerful advertising network. I think the publishers now, especially with video, have gotten much savvier and have realized, hey, we need to know as much about our content as anybody so that we can keep control of that piece of content's destiny in terms of advertising, syndication, distribution, some of the things that Peter mentioned in terms of TV everywhere and so forth. So to answer your question, I think the toolkit is, you have the table stakes of CDN, caching, streaming, all the stuff to make video play. You have video ad servers, which are purpose built, right? You can't use any old ad server. Things like Freewheel and Videology, all these new companies have built purpose-specific technologies to extract value from video, and then a scalable way to generate and manage metadata like a ramp and other solutions.
So it's interesting, you sort of evoked a thought. Where does syndication play into this, right? Because I mean, if you talk about something simple as tags related to a piece of content as it's syndicated, that's easy. But when you get into things like time-based metadata and that, to actually have that start to carry and it be attached to an adjunct to a piece of content as it is syndicated across different sites, I mean, that's a burden from a publishing and a presentation perspective that seems to start to get heavy after a while.
It is, and it's a scale problem, right? Because what you really want is the ability to make sure your video shows up, where and when it should, right? And metadata, again, is a great sort of handshake with all these other technologies to do that at scale, because you don't want to have to editorially place every single video clip on every single article or every single syndication network. And context is a real key to doing that at scale. So for example, knowing everything there's to know about that video in terms of transcript, tag, category, all those things allows you to automatically make that video relevant to an article, or vice versa, by the way. For example, we launched a new product called MetaQ at CES, and MetaQ allows you to programmatically match related content to a video or vice versa. So in the case of somebody like a Morningstar, when they have a video clip mentioning Ford Motor Company, it automatically brings up articles that have been on Morningstar about Ford, in the last 7 days, right alongside the video. And as the playhead continues, if they then mention Caterpillar, it will refresh the contextual content along the same lines. And we've seen increases of 60% of engagement in terms of the completion rates of those videos, and 3 to 5% click-through rates on those related pieces of content. So now you've sort of dramatically increased the viewer's engagement with that piece of content and other content, and driving more inventory, obviously, and more data to leverage.
One of the things that, just coming from kind of the TV 2.0 space, that I'm really bullish about is time-based metadata, right? Timestamp metadata. I know you're doing some interesting things there. Tell me about your perspective on that, because it also then, you have this exponential increase of data capture, right? Once you start tying it to a frame and a point, a moment in time in a video sequence. But tell me about where you see that heading and the power of that and the potential, because I know that you do believe in it as well. But
yeah,
when's it going to be realized?
Yeah, the timeline is sort of, at our core, we sort of really focus on the timeline aspect of a video, in that it is unique, as the content type. So our vision for for video in terms of metadata is you can imagine that ultimately there are multiple tracks of metadata that hang off of every scene in a video. If you're talking about something like a movie, that includes, what characters in the scene, what's the dialogue, what's the scene description, what are the rights and clearances for this particular scene, what are the ad categories in this particular scene, and you can imagine all these tracks, running across virtually as the video is playing, and that's true of short form clips as well. So each of those tracks of metadata ultimately get leveraged for different purposes, going back to what you asked early on, which is where does advertising fit into this? You can imagine that there's a commercial metadata track that is informing, at this point in the video, there's actually an e-commerce opportunity, right? So you should tie it to Amazon or eBay. At this moment, there's a brand opportunity, and so on and so forth. So that's sort of where this will naturally progress, especially as almost all video becomes digital across connected televisions and TV everywhere and all those sorts of things. All this unlocks as an opportunity.
So how important is video metadata to brands as publishers?
To brands as publishers? Well, I think at the end of the day, we've seen a decade-long shift in how content is consumed at a broad level, right? So you've had the consumer redefining that in terms of the consumer now dictates where, when, and how they're going to consume content. It's as simple as an iTunes playlist is an inversion of the record album, right? I'm going to make my own record album, thanks. I don't need the record label telling me what my album should be. I'm going to watch an episode, of 30 Rock when I want to, not when it necessarily is broadcast. And so that reforming of how content gets consumed means that the publisher has a big burden and responsibility to make sure that piece of content, sort of atomically, is wrapped with as much intelligence as possible, because it has to go out there in the wild of the web and be successful, right? It has to be discovered by the search engines. It has to be shared on social networks. It has to be able to talk to ad servers intelligently to send the right ad. It has to be contextually matched to the right piece of content or website, at the right time. And you need to do that at scale, of course, because you couldn't do it editorially. If you look at a network like NBC or Fox, where they're producing tremendous amounts of content, it's beyond the scale of doing it manually. Certainly from an ROI standpoint, but even a practical standpoint, you couldn't do it.